gentlemen, on behalf of the City of Inverness, I would like to welcome you to Culloden Battlefield and Visitor Centre, and thank you for attending this wreath-laying ceremony. We're here to honour those who lost their lives on that day, on the 16th of April, 1746, and what followed. We will pause to remember not only the huge losses that the men died on both sides of the field in one of the fiercest battles in Scottish history. The chiefs of Clan MacBean and Clan MacGillivray died in the first charge on the field that day. I am privileged to be joined by the newly inaugurated Clan Chief MacBean, Richard MacBean, alongside Commander of Clan MacGillivray, Ian MacGillivray, and the Lord Lion. As part of this afternoon's events, we will have a demonstration of sword fighting by two master swordsmen and a presentation of weapons by a master sword maker. Of course, we cannot reenact the horror and terrible conditions of that day, but we can take time to reflect and vow to descend into plans that we will never forget. Thank you.
Well, cousins, war time. We're here to remember, as said, the death of the two chiefs leading Lady Anne Mackintosh's Regiment, Alexander MacGillivray and Major Gillies Mor MacBean. And as the council said, it was a pretty awful day. At the time, it was sunshine. The army of Prince Charles was lined up, had sleep in their eyes, visions were falling. They spent most of the night wandering, trying to make a surprise raid on Culloden's camp they didn't locate, and they were exhausted by the time they got here. We then had to suffer. We were in the centre of the line, and the battle began with artillery exchanges. The government had heavy artillery and could fire further, and the Prince's army took a lot of casualties by the cannons that were firing at them. At the time, Lord George Murray, who was the general in charge of the army, had a bit of a bust-up with the Prince's, I don't know what you call him, but Mr. Sullivan. And Sullivan seemed to take charge, but really have no idea about military matters. So there was confusion, and there weren't orders to charge. And more people were dying from standing in their ranks, the artillery landing amongst them. Clan decided that they could wait no longer, and before the Prince's command had actually reached them, they decided to charge. They charged towards the centre, but what happened was that in the middle of the moor there was an old road, which was a sort of a lower road, and it went veered off. You imagine that I am charging at you, there's a road going across there, and they got to it, and of course it gave them some cover from the fire coming at them. And with the sleet in their eyes, they couldn't quite see what they were doing, and they veered off right. But veering off right, they had all the Camerons, the Appin men, and others who were on their right, that they all barged into. And this huge collection of regiments thundered into Barrel's regiment on the government side and pretty much decimated them. And it was at this point that Colonel Alexander MacGillivray took down some men and was then shot. Wasn't killed at that point. He survived to die by the Well of the Dead, which we passed on the way. And Gillies MacBean killed Lord Robert Kerr. Apparently slashed him from the crown down to the collarbone with his claymore. And some people have said it's the camera that killed him. But I sat one day at a dinner next to the Marquis of Lothian, Michael Kerr, who's very nice, and in his family they do remember that Gillies MacBean killed their forebear. So he wasn't actually terribly used to it. Then, of course, they retreated. All this happened in a matter of minutes. I think the battle was over in about 20 minutes. Fury. Very slow. But Gillies retreated, and famously was he got to a point where we have this from a first-hand account passed down the family that he told his friends to look after themselves and save themselves, and he would stand, and he was facing, according to the family, Kingston's Dragoons. Other accounts say that he was stopping the Argyll militia from getting through a gap in the wall which they'd made in the Culloden enclosure. So there's a bit of uncertainty, but the farm manuscript also says that it's Kingston's Dragoons, and most people talk about the Dragoons, and the Argyll militia weren't Dragoons, so it's probably correct. And he put his back to the wall and sold his life dearly. He killed 13 Dragoons. Dragoons have firearms. They had muskets and whatever weapons they had, and their officers said that nothing but lead would kill that big man. And he killed 13 of them just with his sword while they had muskets, which was pretty remarkable. And he died. But in an account by the family, which is corroborated by the farm manuscript, Cumberland had actually either seen some of what happened or had been told about it, and he came to look at Gillies' body, and he was said to be the tallest man in the Prince's army, 6 foot 4 inches and a quarter. Now, why would you record that? And it's because Cumberland had his body leant up against the wall and measured to see what great height he was, and he was so impressed to hear about the exploit of Gillies at the battle that he gave a commission, paid for the commission himself, for Gillies' son, Donald, who was actually at the battle at the age of 18. And he then joined Drumlanrig's regiment, which was originally formed for service in the United Netherlands. That was in 1747, so he was joined up with a lot of his fellow clansmen of Clan Chattan. And then Donald joined Fraser's Highlanders, went to Canada, and was wounded in battle outside Quebec, but then fought against the American colonists, as most Highlanders did. Lowlanders were on the colonist side, it seems the Highlanders were on the government side, and made his way back. So we remember Gillies, our chief, who died, but there were others too. So if you'll forgive me for checking my notes here, a lieutenant, another of the officers in the regiment, was Angus MacBean of Bailey, tacksman of Bailey, and he died in battle too. But almost all the officers were killed of Clan Chattan. Absolutely extraordinary numbers. Gillies MacBean, another Gillies, there were 4 at the battle. It's very confusing. That's why we call our chief Gillies Mor, Big Gillies, because he was so tall. Gillies of Dunmaglass, who was a tenant of Major Gillies Mor, he survived. In fact, he witnessed the testament dated of Gillies that settled the estate. Angus MacBean of Langs in Daviot, he surrendered and survived. These are the names we have. We don't have them all. Wayne MacBean in Moor, he also surrendered and survived. Donald MacBean of Averada, he survived. Donald MacBean of Downagary. Donald MacBean of Inverness, age 28. Donald MacBean of Nairnside, also remembered as under the name of Duncan. He was transported. Duncan MacBean of Dunmaglass. Gillies MacBean of Alduri. This is actually Gillies MacBean, one of the sons of Donald MacBean of Alduri, and Donald MacBean was one of the family of Kinhyle, the Chiefly family. There's another John MacBean of Alduri. Maybe he was another brother, we're not sure. A John MacBean of Corribra. A John MacBean from Dunkeld. A John MacBean just called from Inverness, age 44, born in 1702. John MacBean of Kailaki, surrendered and survived. John MacBean of Moy. John MacBean just from Perthshire, aged 18. Lachlan MacBean of Terrick. We don't know where Terrick is. I haven't located it, or anyone might be able to tell me. Malcolm MacBean of Tork at David. Taxman of Tork at Bryn, the emigrant. William MacBean of Inverine. William MacBean of Inverness, who died the following month. William MacBean of Moy surrendered. Now there was also said to be a Gillies MacBean of Free by Tomartin, formerly of Bailey, and it was said that he fought under the banner of Cameron of Lochiel. Now the MacBeans of Bailey were related to Camerons of a variety of different Camerons that happened through marriage. So it's quite possible that Gillies was with him. And it does say that he helped carry Lochiel off the battlefield. He'd been wounded in both ankles. And Gillies apparently helped carry him off the battlefield, convey him to safety. But upon crossing the River Nairn at Craigie, they met with a party of Cumberland soldiers, with whom they were obliged to fight. Killing some of them, the others made off. Apparently, Gillies' wife paid attention to the fugitives, and with a pair of scissors extracted 2 bullets, by an altar or table monument in the churchyard of Moy, with a suitable inscription in the Gaelic language. And sadly, that doesn't appear to survive. We're going to have a look for it, but it doesn't appear to be there anymore, or it may be under the ground. There is said also to be a man called Aeneas MacBean, who was pursued by dragoons, but saved himself. So, those are some of them. If I might, if you'll forgive me, just recount a little bit more about Gillies Mor, our chief. So also just to remember that Gillies MacBean, I mentioned, who was the son of Donald MacBean, taxman of Alduri. Donald had a daughter, Margaret MacBean, who married Alexander Grant from the Shugley Grant line of the Grants of Glenmoriston. And he was known as Alexander of the Sword. He was a great swordsman. He was at the battle. He was badly wounded, but he did survive. And his son, Charles Grant, who became a very well-known MP of Inverness, and also chairman of the East India Company, did a lot to help his relatives who were in dire straits for a long time afterwards. Born at Alduri farmhouse. The manner of his birth and baptism is Worshipful County. He was born in March 1746. Some people say the day of the battle. Actually, it was in March. But his father was there with his Grant soldiers on the way, and they decided to baptize him. So, a strange scene took place at Alduri farmhouse. They named the child Charles after the prince. Drawing all their swords, they crossed and clashed them over his cradle, thereby enlisting him in the service of Charles Edward Stuart. And then in token of fealty to his supposed sovereign, each enthusiastic warrior took the child's hand and made it clasp the hilt of his sword with his baby fingers. So that he was swearing allegiance to his prince. So Gillies is remembered by a very famous poem, which I shall try and briefly find. It was written originally in Gaelic, said to be by his nurse. I suspect what that means is it was the nurse that had nursed his children. So I may be wrong. It just says by his nurse. It was then translated into English by an academic some day in Aberdeen University. And then it was set to music by Dr. Clark Whitfield. I have no idea what the music would sound like. I'm going to read out what is probably the oldest version in English of this poem. I can get it back again. Okay, very moving. The clouds may pour down on Culloden's dark plain, but the waters shall wash o'er its crimson in vain. For their drops shall seem few to the tears for the slain, but mine are for thee, my brave Gillies MacBean. Though thy cause was the cause of the injured and brave, though thy death was the hero's, and thy grave, with thy dead foes around thee, piled high on the plain, my sad heart bleeds o'er thee, my Gillies MacBean. How the horse and the horseman they single hand slew, and the mighty single arm do. 100 like thee might the battle regain, but cold are thy hands and heart, Gillies MacBean. With thy back to the wall and thy breast to the charge, full flashed thy claymore in the face of their charge, and the blood of their boldest that barren heath stained. But alas, thine is reddest there, Gillies MacBean. Hewn down, but still fighting, thou sunkest to the ground. Thy blade was one gore, and thy breast was one wound. 13 of thy foes by thy right hand lay slain. Oh, would there were thousands, Gillies MacBean. O loud and long heard shall thy coronach be, and high o'er the heather thy cairn we shall see, and deep in each bosom thy name shall remain, as deepest in mine, my brave Gillies MacBean. And daily the eyes of thy brave boy, that's Donald, before shall thy blade be unfolded, unsheathed thy claymore, and the white rose shall bloom on his bonnet again, should he prove the true son of my Gillies MacBean.
Words. I'm just going to be just very brief here, explaining the connection between the MacGillivrays and MacBeans. And our chief, Alistair Ruin he died. He was mortally wounded on the battlefield just across the way here by a musket ball, I believe. And he crawled back with a drummer boy from the other side. And he came to rest at the Well of the Dead here. I think he was getting water for his wounds. And it said that, I was talking to Philip about this, as well as Paul MacDonald, and it said that two of the fiercest warriors to come out of this day was Gillies MacBean and John Mor MacGillivray. And so I've heard various accounts. Some of them are confused, like Philip said, with so many Gillies MacBeans on that day. But our clans are inextricably linked, historically. And even today, as we enjoyed some music last night, we felt inextricably linked as well. And it's just an honour to be on this ground here with the newly designated chief, Richard, where his ancestors fought and fell. So this is remarkable for us. Both our ancestors fought for the Jacobite cause here. And it's a real privilege and an honour to be back again here with you all, as family, as clanship. So, Mor Anderson Shaw, le bienachyn Clan MacBean agus Clan MacGillivray agus le bienachyn Ula Shaw from Culloden to around the world for the diasporic clans.
this afternoon to remember and commemorate our fallen clansmen on both sides of this battle. Commemorating this, we naturally remember other conflicts over the centuries and those still ongoing. So let's please join together in a few moments of silence to remember all who were lost. Let's pray. Lord God, we remember all who fought in this field. We remember their dedication to and concern for causes long since gone. We thank you for the lives lived and ultimately lost on this field around the world. We pray for people who today find themselves in the midst of conflict, for Ukraine, Afghanistan, Ethiopia, Sudan and many more. We pray for the families, friendships and culture being destroyed, and ask your guiding hand on the minds of the politicians and decision makers who can bring an end to the conflict and destruction. Lord, we pray for those working for peace, guide and strengthen them, and as we depart this site of conflict and loss, help us to find and bring peace in this world. These things we ask in your name, for your glory, forevermore.
And our friends. I think it is particularly noteworthy that the two commanders, cousins at the time, their descendants, are here today. And if you could come up, please. It's an honor.
It's a real honour as well, being in your presence with your clan from around the world as well.
As yours. Thank you.
I'm just going to briefly give a kind of a Gaelic lesson or a Gaelic speech here, and just in a commemoration for everyone being here. Just the importance, just reflecting on what the Lord Lion said about clans, the importance of it. He seems to hit right to the core of the message about what our clan identity is all about. But I just can't express how just very special and very significant a moment this is for our clans historically. And as I said, our 12 confederations, our 12 clans in that confederation. I think MacGillivrays and MacBeans were some of the closest within that clanship and within that confederation. So I'm just going to give a kind of Gaelic blessing here, just to show the, just to give praise and commemoration to this special event here on this ground here. So na hula akin and Shaw, for the Statue Unisha, Canada, from Crustan Tool, Australia, Kuchuk, for Clan MacBean, as Donald and Shaw, for Paul, as Michael, Clan MacBean, as in Chronicle Corla, so the Chilhakin at a Hapichin Shaw, so the Shamusik, Kuchuk and Realtus, the Shanhanavarian, Agus and Shaw, Hayavaridakin, Akashin Kuchuk, the Bianakin at Fatin Tool, Agus Nalaikan at Chin, but Bianakin and Kulavarst, one at Tangus and Shaw. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you. And a real honour again to be with the Chief in this ground. And thank you to Philip as well for organising all this, keeping us, making sure we're doing our things in the right order here.
just going to say a few words about where we need to, where you might want to go and visit around the battlefield. On our way, you passed a marker that said Barrels. That's Barrels Regiment's location, and that's where our clans thundered into Barrels, and so that's where most of the action happened. And if you imagine the wall, it could be the wall over there in the enclosure that Gillies was having his back to. Now it just so happens that yesterday was the Feast of the Transfiguration, and of course it's Sunday, so it's being marked in churches today. And I think the symbolism of being transfigured, changed, perhaps is appropriate, because this battle changed a great deal. And I think that our visit and gathering here hopefully has changed all of us meeting together. We shall go away from here changed for the better. And I think that the battle was a moment of great tragedy and great loss. But in actual fact, it led, ironically, to probably the greatest flowering of Highland culture that had ever been. So it was a height of Highland culture, but it led to something even greater. People dispersed. They went all over the world. They created countries, like Canada. They settled as far as Australia, out in the Far East. What they didn't do is stay down in the mud and down with their sorrows. They got up. They moved around the world. They changed the world for the better. And I think that that's a lesson for us, perhaps, in what are probably quite difficult times these days for a lot of people, is that even when things might seem pretty bad, well, they weren't as bad as they were this day, 16th of April 1746. That may be a bad comparison, but maybe just reflect on it and reflect what people did. They went out, they rebuilt their lives, they did some astonishing things. As I say, they created whole countries. So take that spirit of transfiguration and be inspired by that, because it wasn't the end. It was the beginning of another chapter, and actually over the 100 years that followed, it was probably one of the most glorious chapters for Highland culture.
Good morning. If I let go of this flag, it's going to end up in Nairn. So, I hope you'll forgive me. My name is Alan MacBean, and I have the honour on occasion to represent the Chief of Clan MacBean in Scotland when he's not here. I mention this because, other than the honour that I believe it to be, I have been asked to attend several occasions of what is called the MacBean event. That is pertinent because two of the people who are the prime motivators in that event, celebrating the fighting style of Donald MacBean, a master swordsman, are here today. They are the sword bearers, Paul MacDonald of the MacDonald Academy of Arms, and Mike Smith of the Cat's Glove School of... Thank you. After we finish here, they will be providing swordsmanship demonstrations, actual sword fighting, and presentations on real, antique and reproduction weapons in the event field behind the Visitors Centre. You're all welcome to come along and speak to them while they're not fighting, please. So once we're finished, you're most welcome to join us. Thank you.
Welcome to Culloden Battlefield. We're honoured to have Mr. MacGillivray here. There's a Clan Chattan gathering, tight tune. What we're here for today is to perhaps give you a wee insight notice something about their martial culture and their traditions and the very arms themselves. Because those arms themselves were part of that golden thread of martial culture, interwoven and interlinked with all other aspects of Highland culture throughout history, not just the period of the Jacobite Rising. The culmination here of that culture that was played out on this very field was something that was long-lasting and long-standing and really had not changed in many ways, not just for centuries, but thousands of years. Around us, the land has not changed. And the land has always dictated in any culture the way you best fight. The Highland terrain is not the easiest to negotiate on the best of days. Not a bad day for it. We know it can close in pretty quick. And it can get a wee bit rough or slippy underfoot. Well, the way you act and the way you move and fight in that land and form your tactics becomes unique to different topography and different culture worldwide. In the Highlands, we were good at that, and we were good at fighting light and fighting fast. And light cavalry in certain regards as well. This was not the terrain for heavy armour in that sense, and for mass troops raging against each other. This is ideal ambush territory in that sense. We were known for hit and run techniques and guerrilla warfare all throughout our history. But of course it wasn't just the men themselves that did that. We needed the best of tools to do it with. And we have a long tradition of making the good stuff right here in Scotland too. From as long and as far back as we can forge and make metal blades from the Bronze Age, right through to the Iron Age, where steel became the next innovator, the next material technology to give us something longer, thinner, more flexible, tougher and stronger to make a sword and a blade that's even lighter and faster in your hands to do that job. And up that moment, we become a little bit more fearsome with it. So what we're going to focus on today are some of the arms that this battlefield knew well. First hand being played out with the basket-hilted broadsword. This sword being the front-line weapon of not just this battlefield, but many throughout not just British Isles, but throughout Europe in the 17th and the 18th centuries. The culmination and really the epoch of the single-handed, cutting-based broadsword. And it was never bettered. Thank you! A wee hand for our piper, I think. One of the many tunes that celebrated our martial culture that way, and the people that made it, the people that made their names by the sword through history, battles that were played out in the lands around us, and the outcomes of them. Whether that was something to celebrate or something to lament, the same pipe tunes would be composed. Songs and poems would be composed as well, and read and sung and heard and played at gatherings such as we've had today. Well, here we might get a wee bit more hands-on with some of this steel, and we're going to end our talk today with a demonstration of live combat with these blades as well. First, we'll just give you an idea about some different weapons that were played out in Culloden Battlefield itself. Often Highland culture from about the age of 8, you'd be expected to start to get your training in. And if you weren't already knocking about, scrapping with your mates, which is quite common with any kid, still is today, then you'd be taught the art of the sword. Defend yourself and overcome the other man. But it's never a good idea to give two keen kids sharp swords and say, go for it, lad. Only one of them's coming back at most. So, training tool, the basket sword, equivalent. And for as long as we've had metal blades, from the Bronze Age we trained with wooden swords. The Roman army, of course, trained with short wooden swords for their their gladiuses. This was no different from the Highlands. So the same length as the steel blade with a leather or a wicker basket to protect your hand. And it protects your knuckles, it protects your wrist. Bashed in. So the steel equivalent, that basket hilt, is literally there to stop you losing bits. Losing your finger or your entire hand on a good broadsword cut. And so this was the training tool called the single stick. And it was ash. Ash is the temper. A great way to train. So you would go along to your local fencing master, who was probably himself with a few battlefield stories to tell, and you'd get your lessons. And the fencing masters would mix this in with the physical culture as well. After the training, they'd give the boys oat cakes and cheese and say, right, get torn into that boys. And then once it's finished, they'd say, right boys, off up to that hill up there, off up to Ben Moe, up to the top and back again. And the first one back is going to get the rest of the oat cakes and cheese. You said, build the boys to become fitter, to become stronger, and more courageous and confident in the use of the sword, also in the use of the land as well. Now, we'll get into demonstrating this a wee bit more, and you'll see that this is a flexible blade as well as good tempered steel is, and that's the magic quality of tempered steel. It's tough and it's hard, can be sharpened to a good edge and can be ground out with a light, fast section of cutting or thrusting blade, and that's what this is. So this one in particular though, you might see close up, there's a bit of engraving, etching in fact, going on the blade here. And this etching, it's not got a Jacobite motto, it's got GR and a crown. And GR of course is for George, King George. That's not who we were fighting for, that is the government crown. So what do we have? A blade that's either been a captured redcoat blade on a Jacobite hilt, or more likely this is one that's been made for a Highland militia, for Highland men, and the hilt made in the Highlands, but this is a blade made for the government, made for the redcoat troops. So for the likes of the Argyll militia or such that were playing out here, their own side of the battle, this is the sort of sword that were in the hands of those men. And that sword there dates from the earlier 18th century, about 1710, 1715. Here is a sword though, with a wee bit of a story behind it too. And this has a battlefield story, for this sword was excavated from the grounds, a ditch in the grounds of Bankton House in Prestonpans. This is an older sword yet, this is a 17th century sword, from about 1620, 30, early to mid 17th century, called a ribbon hilt, with flat sections of steel all forge welded together to make your hilt up. A good cutting sword this one, no doubt it's played a part in that battle of Prestonpans, 1745. And here we have another different sword again. It's a back sword, it's got a little larger hilt, but on one side we see quite a difference. Not the usual patterns of branches and such here, but a big round oval going on here. And this tells us something about this sword. This is a sword designed for use on horseback. And this pattern of sword is also a government sword. And we know that the government dragoons played their part fiercely on this side of the field on that day in Culloden as well. And this is exactly the type of sword that they carried there. Why the big round ring? There's a bit of a myth about this. Some people will say that this was for putting the reins of your horse into, so you could hold it and control your horse, but it's not very practical when it comes to doing that. You're on horseback and you're in the midst of it and it's all kicking off and the battle's closing in around you. You need to be able to control your sword, but when you need to control your horse, it's important to switch from one to the other quickly. And the easiest way to do that, this is your dominant sword, and suddenly you've got to be over there quickly. Switch hands and your fingers go into that loop right there. Simply grab your hilt without interruption, but control your horse, get them away to where you need to be, and then establish your sword at your convenience when you've got time to do that. It was once in the hands of a rather famous Highlander by the name of Rob Roy MacGregor. This is a sword that MacGregor himself handed to his landlord in his deathbed, who was a McLaren, and it was in that McLaren line until a couple of generations ago. Went away from sword that can tell stories. But Rob Roy McGregor was a man of the sword. He had honour himself to uphold. He had business interests to uphold by way of reaving cattle, an ancient tradition in the Highlands. It wasn't seen as dodgy at all. But a way to train your boys in going over numerous glens, come back dozens or hundreds of cattle under the cover of darkness, and if it did kick off, you had to be prepared to fight and defend yourself if you had to. That's no easy thing to do. And the young lads were trained in what was known as the School of the Moon in these arts as well. And essentially it's the same tactics as small-scale raiding forces. We were the last warrior culture in Europe to use the two-handed sword with great effect. We were the last warrior culture in Europe to use a sword and shield combination as well. These things had died out in Europe in the 16th century. But the land hadn't changed and the tactics hadn't changed, and so the old ways still worked well. And the two-handed sword, known somewhat as the claymore, like this, the Highland great sword, which is not as big as most people think. It only comes up to about your sternum, your chin, no bigger than that, and is certainly not as heavy as most people imagine too. These swords were somewhere between £5 and £6 generally in weight, which in the two hands about you allows you to wield that sword with great effect. For chucking out time, that can be a handy tool. Well, a cabrac's a tremendous weapon. Again, these are not heavy blades, they're actually quite thin. Start to wield them, move them about with a decent amount of force and heft behind your swings too. A solid cut anywhere on that blade, because there's not a lot of steel to hold it in the barrel, and you will smash the blade off that straight away, and your second cut can follow up to the man in front. So the Highlanders obliged this weapon to be obsolete. Take that out of the barrel. And so the British Army had to step up their weapons against our tactics in that sense. And at any point now, because all this concentration is on my target, if at any point I leave an opening, an advanced opening of the arm especially, like field 1, it's designed to go in around and here, but he's met it and returned one of his own good time. Well, there might be an answer to that one. The second return will fly in a circle, meeting his target, stopping it, and then returning to this target here. It's trained along the way, so he's got an answer too. And he throws an action called St. George around to belt in to my left temple. Well, I might have an answer there too, and this is simple returns. This is simple direct actions with the broadsword in returning, simple movements, high line, low line, we're going for the legs, we're going for the head, we're going for any target that's available, open. This is simple swordsmanship until one good cut. Cut at the wrist, it's closed. Tailors haven't worked for you, like.